Lando Norris first, Oscar Piastri second. The main thing is taking nothing away from Lando Norris's win. I actually think he probably would have caught Oscar on pace anyway. He was quicker in the final stint. I never heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. I never heard them tell Lando over the radio that Oscar had a penalty. So it didn't feel like did they?
They did because they said if we pit, we're not going to follow him in. They said he's got a penalty, so if we pit, we're not going to stack.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
fair
Oh
enough,
yeah,
fair
yeah. There
enough.
was there was conversation about double staffing. They're
yeah,
like, no, we
yeah,
can't. Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. I missed that one then, but he wasn't driving like someone who was just going to accept the penalty, was going to gift him the win. He looked like he wanted to do it on pure pace. So top marks to Lando, but obviously all came down to that penalty from Oscar Piastri braking too hard. So, Coops, can you give us a little bit of
Yo,
insight exactly into what happened? I'm sure a lot of people have heard it, but there's been report after report, and it was like this, and it wasn't like this, and such didn't get it, and Oscar didn't get it the first time, and George didn't get it in Canada. So, furnish us with the information as to why you think, well, why the FIA said he got the penalty, and then whether you agree with it or not.
okay. So there was a couple of safety cars. The first one he did the same thing, but don't think he did it quite to the extreme. So he braked because for anyone who doesn't know, when the safety car lights go off, you get to a certain part of the track, you have to slow the pack down because the leader is the de facto safety car and controls the pace, and you cannot go fast and then past the safety car, you get penalty, slam dunk, all that kind of stuff. So you've got to get that gap. So he slowed the pace down in the first restart, and then off he went. Second restart, slowed it down again. Verstappen comes alongside, gets straight on the blower, as every single Formula One driver does, even if they're pals, they run to the school teacher as soon as they can. And the school teacher is, they go on the radio because they know the FIA is listening to all the communication. And there's sporting directors and all that stuff that have conversations with them as well. So anyway, the second one, the FIA didn't like, gave him a 10-second penalty. So this is where everyone's going on about because George Russell apparently did it
Mm.
in Canada. And everyone's saying it's all this British bias and all this carry on.
George's Lando was, or Max was closer to him already. Max
Mm.
arguably nearly deserved the penalty for that because Max was doing the old Max thing that they brought in the rule for of having a look on the
Getting
outside.
alongside, yeah,
And at that point, it probably was George doing a little bit of gamesmanship, going, get back in your place.
yeah,
But it wasn't as dramatic. Sorry, to continue there.
yeah.
Tell us how it was different
So,
there on the dramaticness.
so the reason it's different under dramaticness is because it's all to do with brake pressures and there's a lot of data the FIA have at their disposal, not just the visual like we see and you're like, oh, that looked a bit iffy, or Max is exaggerating it, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They look at data to do with inputs, outputs, and all that sort of stuff. So according to the data the FIA released, Oscar Piastri produced 60 psi pressure towards the brake pedal. George Russell's was 30, and the conditions and the situation, they deemed that to be unnecessary and a bit dangerous and slapped him with 10 seconds. 10 seconds is consistent this season. Seems to be more consistent with 10 seconds, especially under this situation than before. But what's interesting is that apparently it's came out, and it was the race.com that had an exclusive. The FIA were already looking into Piastri's driving under the safety car at the previous safety car restart, the first one, not the one that you got penalised for. So they already kind of were like, oh, we don't like this.
Mm.
Mm.
Is
It
this...
was
Oh,
it was noted really quickly.
Mm.
Like
the
by the
second
time
time
they
it was
got round,
noted, they
yeah,
were
really
watching it. And
quickly.
that's why
Yeah.
they've came out now, because it's clear now they were keeping an eye on it and they were like, we don't like that. Watch this. Watch him. They were all just like watching Piastri to see what he did. And as soon as he did it, they're like, oh, rule book. And there's a guy at the back flicking through the pages and whatever else they do back there, or the tablet. Uh,
Another big difference, obviously you mentioned like the PSI pressure was 59.9, whatever it was for Piastri versus 30 for George. In Canada, George slowed from 140 kph to 85 kph, which is less than 60 kilometers an hour. Still a lot. If there was a car right behind him, someone would have hit him, but Max was, like I said, out to his side, and George was playing the get back there, buddy kind of thing. Piastri, by comparison, slowed from 218 kilometers an hour to 50. That is like
That's
hitting a
almost that's
wall.
that's almost stopping, isn't
That
it?
is like hitting a
Mm.
wall in a Formula One car. And it was dramatic. And Max had to go offline onto the wet patch. So are we sort of agreed that a penalty was fair? If maybe we might debate on what penalty should have been given?
I think before we go on to that, I think I kind of understand why Piastri did it because the safety car lights in the second restart came out a lot later.
Hmm.
So he has to put the brakes on to get that gap, or like I've described earlier on about getting the gap because you're not allowed to pass the safety car. You don't want to sprint off and then have to slow down again because the safety car's there and that will compromise a lot of things and cause all sorts of issues. So I get why he did it. He just didn't quite execute it the right way. Under the conditions, as you say, the drop from 215 to 50, that's just too much.
Hmm.
And you don't want, I think it was the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix under COVID. Was it Emilia Romagna or was it
It
the one at
was
Mugello?
Mugello, yeah, the
Yeah,
pile
where
of
Magello.
Bottas
stopping
kept
and
it slow
starting.
right to the route because it's such a long line, and the people at the back were going fast up the front, and it just caused all sorts.
Which
So we
is
don't
where
want,
this new rule has come in. Well, not new rule, sort of always a gentleman's agreement that you don't go and stop and go and stop. And then they made it official that no, you don't go and stop.
yeah,
The second you go, that's it, you're gone. If you
yeah,
go 10 corners early, that's your bloody problem. You get
yeah.
overtaken.
If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. But you can't do
Mm.
that. It was a very expensive issue back then at Mugello. Uh, but for me, I will put my stall out here right now, and I've got the hat, I've got the gear. Piastri made the mistake and he got hit with the penalty he deserved to get hit with.
Hmm.
And that's it. In my opinion.
James, where do you sit on it? Did he deserve the penalty? If he did, was 10 seconds harsh or was it fair?
I was going to disagree because I thought it was harsh. But when you mentioned the speed that he came down to what he was, I do think that's obviously that is fairly dangerous, fair enough. But I just don't really especially if they were aware of it from the time before in the safety cars. I'd much rather the FIA say, by the way, like give him a little bit of a warning. You can't be doing that again. I don't like these sort of races determined by what happened because someone nearly crashed under a safety car. Like Verstappen didn't really have to avoid it. He was going straight anyway. He just went past the car.
Hmm.
I think the weather conditions didn't help because I think in a normal weather, Verstappen season way earlier doesn't make a big deal out of it. The safety car did end really pretty sharply, and you could see Oscar wanted to get going before Stowe. Sorry, before Stowe, yeah. Is it Stowe or Cops? I can't remember now. Before that,
Not cops.
it must be Stowe then. Before Stowe, like he wanted, like I thought it was harsh. I think 10 seconds is that harsh. I think maybe 5 seconds would have been fine. But you saying the speed, I can see why they potentially gave him penalty because it was quite dramatic. But I don't think that sort of thing should be like. It feels like over refereeing, so I feel it's a bit harsh. I don't think he should have got a penalty for it, just to be on the other side of the fence. I just don't like seeing races decided because of that. I'd rather than tell them you can't be doing that again and get a penalty, rather than if that was the case, and them think, oh, that looks a bit dodgy, but let's not wait until he makes a mistake. So
Hmm.
I think it potentially ruined the end of the race as well. So I think it was a bit harsh.
Very fair. And it comes back to a conversation we had about Max Verstappen a couple of times this year of if you make an illegal overtake, why isn't there the thing that the FIA say, we're looking into that, you have one
Hmm.
lap to give that place back, or you risk being penalized.
Yeah.
Surely the fact that like something gets noted should mean that should be enough. Like, okay, I've been noted for that, I need to give the place back. And
Yeah.
maybe there did need to be a thing of, okay, well, if they're looking at you could maybe argue that the two safety cars came out really close together. There was what, like 3 laps between them or something like that.
Hmm.
So there was maybe literally not enough time for them to even say to the McLaren wall, we're looking at that, tell Oscar not to do that again if there's another safety
Yeah.
car, just to play devil's advocate on that. But
Hmm.
I agree. I think this opens a wider question of should the stewards be a little quicker of um, give that place back, or don't do that again. If you do that again, we will look into it. That doesn't mean if you do that again, we'll punish you because it might not be anything,
Hmm.
but we've given you the warning. It's now in your hands. You could take your gamble
Yeah.
and gamble that we'll do nothing about it, or you take your gamble and we're going to give you a 10-second penalty. You're going to ruin your race. Uh,
Yeah.
for my part, I think a penalty was fair. I thought 10 seconds. Not that I don't think it was harsh, because if it was even slightly wetter, Max might have just gone into the side of him
Mm.
completely. You're right to say if it was drier, he wouldn't bother him in the slightest. This wouldn't have happened. So again, conditions play a factor in that. My issue is just the inconsistency of
Mm.
what earns a 10-second penalty. Like
That's Verstappen. That's what Verstappen got in Spain when he drove
how
into
does
George
Max
Russell.
deliberately driving into the side of George
Mm.
Russell get 10 seconds when Sebastian Vettel did that, he got a drive through or
Mm.
stop go. He got a 10-second stop go
10
penalty,
second
didn't
stop
he? Yeah,
go.
in
Yeah.
Baku. And Max does this year, it's 10 seconds. Lewis rams Max off the track in rams smacks Max off the track in Silverstone, gets only 10 seconds for it. There's a again, and we've kind of brought this up, but I don't want to linger too long on this because this maybe deserves an off-season discussion about the FIA rulings and penalties. But 10 seconds, it feels like they've kind of stopped going to 5 seconds entirely. It's just like 10-second penalty for you and for you and for
Yeah.
you, and
It feels quite
maybe
reactive. There's people
kind
saying
of
5 seconds. And I always think it's a little bit like I think my overall impression of the FIA is just quite rock bottom at the moment. Like having the formation lap start behind the safety car was just crazy. Like
yeah, it was.
who's
What's the point
the
of
sun
full
was
wet
out,
tires?
and also I thought the whole point was that now that everyone has to start before wets, but that didn't happen either.
Yeah, the sun was out. They have full wet tires, which none of them used, even during a
Then
deluge when they were saying,
then
"Oh, it's
people
too wet,"
pitted.
and people
People
pitted.
pitted for dries.
The Formula Two cars had no issue.
Yeah,
And the weather
it's
was
just.
heavier when they were out. I thought that was
Is that,
pathetic, to
but
be
that's the
perfectly
problem. Is
honest.
but then that's the problem. Like it's a little bit like referees in football. You're constantly doubting the decisions being made. So when it comes to something like this, it's just like, well, how have they decided that's 10 seconds, or how have they decided to take
Yeah,
the safety car out of this formation then when it's absolutely balmy outside? I know it's wet, but crazy.
yeah.
The
It's
the biggest reason for the 10 or 5 seconds is if there's enough mitigation. So
Yeah,
if there's a mitigating element, say for example the Tsunoda Ocon Lawson thing, if they were looking at that later on in the race, somebody might have got a 5 second because there were three abreast and there wasn't somewhere to
yeah.
go, that sort of thing. But with Piastri, there wasn't any mitigation. He slammed on the brakes to get a gap and caused people to have avoiding action, and he slammed on the brakes too much. For me, it's just a bit too black and white. If there's a wee bit more grey in there, there could have been an issue. With regards to doing things like telling them don't do it again, you're running the risk of adding another grey element and another
yeah,
woolly element to
Yeah, I know what you
rules.
mean.
You
that's fair.
kind of need to be you have to be one or the other. See this? Oh, don't.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like telling your
It's
child to
like people
stop
get all
doing
people
stuff.
can do other things and get a warning to do it
Yeah,
once. Yeah,
yeah.
I know what you mean.
So it's that kind of thing. Like if anyone listening to this or watching this, if they've got a toddler and you tell them, "Gonna go do that," and you're getting your toy taken off you, then they do it again, and you don't take the toy off you, or you do take. It's
Mm.
mixed messages. There kind of needs to be that black and white. And I think when it comes to these kind of penalties, when it comes to overtaking and getting off the track and giving an advantage, that by design gives the stewards the opportunity to say, like,
Give that
on
back.
your bike, get back. But
Mm.
where a decision like the Piastri one,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
not
allow
it's
for
not as
that.
cut
What are you going
it's
to
not as
do?
cut and dry. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
But also, would you argue that it being wet is also a mitigating factor both ways? If it's not wet, Vax sees him and decide and doesn't make a big deal out of
If
it. But
it's
because it's
not wet,
wet, is that?
Piastri wouldn't do it anyway. But
You possibly wouldn't have had to.
Mm.
But
yes,
But then is that? Yeah,
the other
yeah.
point is if it was wetter, it could have been much worse. And I think this again comes back, and we move on from this, right? But just one final point. This comes back to the point of like the FIA claim almost weekly that they don't give penalties based on the outcome, and then repeatedly give penalties based on nothing but the bloody outcome.
Yeah.
I personally think the penalty should be given based on the outcome. If you have like two cars tapping into each other and one has a little bit of a pirouette like the passes did, which was nice and synchronized,
Beautiful. Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. If one is deemed to be at fault, there was no danger. There was no real danger. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't silly. There was no lockup. It was just a racing incident, but one person should be deemed at fault. 5 second penalty, racing incident or 5 second penalty if it's deemed to be maybe a little bit harsher than that. But in the case where, and I'm just going to pick on him again because it was Silverstone, where you've Lewis coming up the inside to move that was never on, and Max gets 52G shunted into the wall, that maybe deserves a drive through at least, not a 10 second penalty that you could literally drive through in the second best Formula One car ever made on your home circuit. Again, different discussion. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know your thoughts on that. Do you think that the penalties should just like buck up and be given based on the actual outcome rather than, oh, it was just because it was a crash, it's 5 seconds. Whether you killed someone or not, it's 5 seconds. It's anyway. Let's move on to the winner and actually talk about the person who won the British Grand Prix. Lando Norris finally won at home, his eighth win ever in Formula One, brings him level with the likes of Charles Leclerc and Danny Ricciardo, which is pretty cool. Got 8 wins in just over a year. It's not bad going, all things considered. He's now on 4 for the season, one behind Oscar, but they're level on podiums, if I'm not wrong. And that was a really, really special one for him. Coops, he said that shy of winning the championship, this is the highlight of a Formula One career kind of thing for him is winning his home race.
Of course it is. I mean, they're going to come out and say, yeah, it's just like every other one. I mean, come on. Like, we know he's not, and he needs this. He's had a few races up until Australia, and then this one where people were doubting it. We were doubting it. We were thinking Piastri had a match on him. His racecraft was letting him down a wee bit. His decision making was a bit off. Austria came in. I was very confident, very chilled out, very relaxed. That qualifying lap, wow, probably one of the best laps that he's done in his career.
Mm.
Maybe if you take away the one that you got to get in his first podium. I mean, I still watch that video.
In Austria,
Coached,
yeah.
yeah, to get the 5 second gap.
Last lap, Lando.
Yeah, and he's getting coached at every corner. And it's just brilliant. It's Hollywood stuff. So, yeah, I mean, he was really good all weekend and can't really fault him. And that car's just a beast in it, really. I mean, that car just didn't matter what condition, could be too hot, too cold, rainy, mixed. It could be a goddamn tornado and that thing will drive through it. Like, where the Ferraris they were great on Friday, decent on Saturday, nowhere on Sunday. Mercedes had this should have been Mercedes weekend because this is a cold, dreary, wet, not changeable conditions. Last year in these kind of conditions, Hamilton won it. This year they were nowhere, so that's more about the team themselves.
And this year's Mercedes is better than last year's Mercedes. There's absolutely no question about that. It might not have a 7-time world champion in it, but it is a better car.
Yep. And then, Antonelli, can't really say much about him and his race, but we'll get to him. And then Max Verstappen set the car up for a dry race with very thinned out downforce, and even he couldn't drive it. So, no one can really go on about Snowda this weekend because, Max Verstappen was struggling with that thing. So,
Good win for Lando though. James, what did you make? Proud of is the first Brit to win since Lewis Hamilton, obviously. He's the first Brit to win, first McLaren win, more importantly, since Lewis Hamilton in 2008. And I'll throw out another comparison to you. The last person to win Australia, Monaco, and Britain in the wet was Lewis Hamilton in 2008. And guess what he did that year?
He won the championship, didn't he?
He did win the championship, yes. So is this, obviously all the talk after Canada was, oh, Lando can't handle it, he's a bottler, he's lost it, he comes out in Austria, cool as a cucumber, missed an entire hour of practice, blows everybody away by half a second qualifying, and had the measure of his teammate in defence all weekend, and now comes out and wins in Britain. Is this, I don't want to say is a game back on, because it's literally only just the halfway point of the season, but more than anything, like Monaco is here, Silverstone is here. In terms of like settling his nerves, this has got to be just the icing of the cake for Lando's confidence going into the second half of the season.
Yeah, well, I think another good stance is his first back-to-back race wins of his career, which is a great confidence booster.
Hmm.
I think to be honest, I agree with you. I think it is game back on because I think what was it, 20 points after Canada,
26 after Canada. Yeah,
26.
it was
You know,
big.
imagine if Piastri then wins the next two races, it's up to 38. You know, like it's a big, more than a race win. It's you're in a bit of like where you have to hope Oscar has some issues or whatever that is, and so I think it is game on. You know, what is it now? 8 points, 7, 8 points between them.
8 points,
Um, and this is a
which would
great
have been a
confidence
race
boost.
win with fastest lap last year, but is
True.
slightly more than a race win
Yeah.
overall first to second now.
And for some reason, they took that rule away. But anyway, um, so I think it is game back on. I think it's a great confidence booster for him. I think we're coming up to the stage of the season where um, the more familiar tracks. I know Oscar would have driven them anyway, but I think it's been a great couple of weeks for him. It's always nice to win in front of your home crowd as well. Well, not that I know that, but I just think I think it'd be really good for him. And Oscar's, I think I think the general consensus has been that Lando on like natural raw pace has had the edge over Oscar.
Hmm.
I think what we've seen from Oscar has been more consistent, less error prone, and we say in this, I don't remember Lando having a mistake in this race. Obviously, he only lost the position because the team had a bit of a slow stop, and it was Oscar that was making the mistake behind the safety car, having that twitch late on dry
Mm.
tires when he went across the grass, and so I think it's been a great weekend for him. Mixed conditions. Lando's always been pretty good in the rain anyway, so I'm sure he was thinking this is going to be great. But no, it is 100% game back on. It's less than a first. It's basically a first and second away. Get back in front of the championship if you can before the summer break. I must admit, I did predict one of my bold predictions before the summer, before the at the beginning of the year was before the summer break for Oscar to be winning the championship. So I might blow that out, ruin that for myself. But I think it's game on 100%, and he's going to want to make it three in a row at another iconic circuit as well. So yeah, really good performance from him, and we're getting a bit more of a mature Lando Norris. I don't think necessarily maturer in the way he acts and everything, but just more like a mature racer and a
Mm.
more solid racer. And I think we're seeing that the last month or so. And I think he's taken that extra step.
I completely agree. He's also on a bit of a run of home races. He's won Oscar's home race, he's won Charles's home race, and he's now won his own home race. And last year he won
Nice.
Max's home race, and he won Red Bull's home race. So he's in good form. And
There,
next up is Belgium, which he can claim as a home race as well. His mother is
true.
Belgian, if I'm not wrong.
Mm.
And that would be the stuff of dreams for him to win a second home race in a row, and go and take a third race victory in a row. And then we're getting into Hungary, where he should have won, but he gave the position back. Holland, where he dominated.
Mm.
I think that's his best win of his entire career by miles in terms of just sheer pace and domination over everybody else for the whole weekend. And then we're getting into the fun ones the rest of the season. Singapore, he's won in as well. So we're getting into a run of form, and it's a good time for him. So long may that continue. 8 points is absolutely nothing. But again, this is far from over. Oscar is a robot, as we said. I genuinely don't mean that as an insult. I actually mean that as the biggest possible compliment to him. I think this is going to be a fascinating, and it's just as well that we're getting this battle for the front because it's very 2014. Um, but we said last week that McLaren could break 1,000 points. They're now on 460. So I think our 1,000 point prediction is still on for now.